So one of the problems that causes a lot of confusion in Chapter 14, in Section 5 in particular, involves creating a Venn diagram for basically the results of a survey that has been studied or collected, and now using that information, creating that Venn diagram to then answer questions about the different types of categories of people or items that were under review. So in the last example, in my notes from section 14.5, applications of sets or Venn diagrams, we saw this problem, and here's what it said. A survey of college students found that the following were owned by them. 356 owned iPods, 293 owned laptops, 285 owned gaming systems, 193 owned both an iPod and a laptop, 200 owned an iPod and a gaming system, 139 owned a laptop and a gaming system, 68 owned all three devices, and 26 owned none of the devices. So the way we begin to answer our questions, which are in the example, is by first creating this Venn diagram. So what I've done here is I've made myself a universal set and three circles, one representing iPod, gaming system, and one representing laptops. I then begin always in the overlapping region. So I start with, okay, how many people owned both a iPod, a gaming system, and a laptop? And we're told that piece of information. In particular, we were told that 68 owned all three. So I would begin by writing 68 in the overlapping region. The next thing I want to look for is perhaps this region, iPod and gaming system. We know that there were 200 who owned an iPod and a gaming system. So in this region here, there should be a total of 200, and we've already accounted for 68. So we simply subtract 200 minus 68 to get our result. And when I do that, my 200 minus my 68, we should be ending up with 132. So we write 132 there. Similarly, we'd like to discuss how many are in the laptop and iPod region. We've already discussed the 68. So laptop and iPod, there were 193 who owned a laptop and an iPod. So 193 minus the 68 that we've already talked about, and we will be left with 125. Excellent. Now what about this region? Those who own both a gaming system and a laptop. Well, gaming systems and laptops accounted for 139 who owned a laptop and gaming system. So subtracting once again, 139 minus the 68 that we've already talked about, and we should be left with 71 here. So now the question simply remains, what about the iPod region? What about the gaming system? And what about the laptop? Well, we know that there were a total of 356 college students who said they owned an iPod. And we've already accounted, if you look at our picture carefully, we've already accounted for 132, 68, and 125. If we add those numbers together and subtract from our total of 356, we would get our final answer here of 31. Similarly, for gaming systems, we have 285 people who own a gaming system, but we've already accounted for the gaming system 132, 68, and 71. If you add those numbers together and subtract your total from the number of people who owned a gaming system, 285, you will get your answer there of 14. And finally, laptop. We know that there were a total of 293 people who owned a laptop. So since we've already discussed 125, 68, and 71, adding that together and subtracting from the total of 293 who owned a laptop will give us our answer here, which will be 29. So this is where we're at the moment. Finally, in the universal set out here, we were told in the beginning of the problem that 26 owned none of the devices. So 26 would be the number in the universal set that is not in any of the three circles. With that information now, we can simply answer our questions. How many people owned a laptop? Sorry, the first question said how many own an iPod and a gaming system, but no laptop? So we look back at our chart here. An iPod and a gaming system, but no laptop would be 132. Okay, our second question, how many own only a laptop? Well, looking here, we see that number is 29. Our next question, how many own at least one of the three devices? Well, that is where we would need to add every number that are represented in these circles, and that would give us our answer of 470. And finally, they ask you, how many students were surveyed in total? Well, we had the 470 in the circles plus the 26. That gives us 496. So once again, we've discussed today that you can use Venn diagrams to set up a situation that models a given list of data, results from an interview or survey that's been taken, and then use that information to solve questions, solve problems and answer questions. I hope that helps a little bit. If you have any other questions, please let me know. Happy practicing.